So where do I need to go? Just now started the video with me now. Understand? I don't understand. People will not see me like this. Well, that's what it is. I want to start from here now. Welcome. 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 Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. We are making sure that you're able to join us both on Facebook and on Instagram. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining. Thank you very much. Please click the share button, invite friends, invite family. We're in the 11th episode of LoveWorks, episode number 11, and I look forward to being able to host us today. And we're so grateful to God for how far God has brought us. We thank God. Just click on the share button. Thank you for joining. We thank you for being a part of our this episode of LoveWorks. And I do hope that you're keeping safe and doing well. Thank you for being a part of this. We thank you. We invite you. Just click on the share button. Just click, invite your friends, invite family, invite people within your network. We thank God for this. In the 10th episode, we're dealing with some questions and answers, and I'm glad that we can continue to do with that and see how many more questions we're able to attend to today. Thank you so much. Thank you for those of us who are joining. I once again, I welcome you. I pray that we are able to make the most of this time, the most of this session of LoveWorks. We thank you, Father. We give you all the honor. We give you all the praise. We thank you. We'll be starting in a few minutes. I just want to give you some time, people from around the world to join, to be a part of this session, this episode of LoveWorks. We thank you. And while they're doing that, last week we reviewed some questions. We looked at the issue of divorce, that many marriages in most recent times seem to end in divorce. In other words, divorce rates seem to be on the rise around the world. We thank God. We thank God for that. And we asked what could be the reason. Is there anything one can do to ensure that they have a successful marriage? And so we're grateful to God. And, we attended to quite a few questions. We dealt with the question of, as a Christian in terms of a marriage partner, what should I be looking for? Can I marry someone I'm not very excited about? What if I'm not very excited about my future partner? And could this mean that this is not the right person? We dealt with that. And, we would try to have a quick summary. And the third question, we talked about, I'm involved in a relationship where there are many conflicts and problems. Should I stop the journey towards marriage? Will things get better? We also attempted that question. We attended to it. There was a fourth question. This was episode number 10. I'm a Nigerian. When is a Christian truly married? We have done a cultural marriage and attend church. Do we have to be joined by a pastor, a priest before we can be truly married? Those are very wonderful questions, and I hope that that you were able to be a part of that broadcast or session. And if you're not, it's still out there on Facebook. Please, go. I'm sure that you should be able to listen to it and to enjoy the benefits of that session. The seventh question, is there anything like a Christian marriage? Why can I not just marry anyone? Is marriage relationship guaranteed that I'll be happy? Can I marry just anyone? And, we looked at that, and maybe we would be able to do a recap of that. The sixth question, I'm dating someone and I'm a Christian and he's not a Christian. What should I do? Can I continue with the relationship? Is there hope of success for our marriage? Great question indeed. And then the seventh question, is there anything like a Christian marriage? I think I said this ahead, but it's actually number 7. And I think this is where we stopped last week. So just take a moment. We invite your friends, and invite your friends and click on the share button and invite people within your network. We thank God for this session of LoveWorks, and I'm glad that you're able to be a part of it and to be able to join us. Thank you very much. We thank God for everything. And we're going to be launching out in a moment. I want to welcome you. Yes, those of you on Instagram, very much welcome. Thank you so much. And then Those of you out there who are joining by Facebook, I want to welcome you. I see Joel out there. Joel, oh, welcome. Welcome. I see that you are there. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting friends, inviting family. I will be recapping a few of the questions. Maybe I even skipped question 5 from last week. It said question 5 said you talk and teach about conviction before marriage. What does conviction really mean? How can I make the right choice? Is there a way to know that my marriage will work out? My marriage will go the distance? Thank you very much. I welcome Adura. Well done. So very soon we'll just continue. We'll start from this 11th episode. 11th episode. Father, we thank you very much for this time. And we're asking for clarity. Help us, those who are here, those who are coming, just that we'll make the best of our time together. Thank you, Father, because we know you have heard. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Let me recap on a few questions. Somebody says in verse 5, in question number 5, you talk and teach about conviction before marriage. What does conviction really mean? How can I make the right choice? Is there a way to know that my marriage will work out? Those are very, very important questions. By the way, all these questions I think are great questions. So when we say conviction is that satisfaction that a person should have. The question of marriage and marriage partner is a big question to say, how will I know my marriage partner when I meet one, and so on and so forth. The way to look at it is that there are no guarantees in life, okay? But when it comes to a marriage relationship, because of the nature of the marriage relationship, there are some basic things a person should consider. One of those things is, if you are coming from what you might call a Christian perspective, you're a Christian, the first thing is what you might call divine leadership. You want to pray, you want to be guided by God, but then you also want to make sure that the person that you feel that God is leading you to marry, that you are connected with the person. There's some form of satisfaction, because you're going to live with this person. Okay, you are satisfied. You're going to live with this person, and then when I talk about conviction, I talk about conviction from the perspective that you make decisions in life, and they have to have a basis. They have to have a basis. And then the more important the decision you're making is, the more important that the basis is based on certain fundamental principles. So we talk about conviction in marriage. What that really means is that you're going to make a commitment to live with somebody for the rest of your life. So there has to be an inner commitment. Is that inner commitment I call conviction, that you're making a commitment that I will stay with this person for the rest of my life, and they are not giving room for divorce. They're not saying, if things don't work out, I'm going to check out. Because when people think like that, there'll be 1,001 reasons why they must check out, and those things usually will lead to a breakdown in marriage. So that's why. So that conviction is, from a Christian perspective, is a knowing that cannot always be fully explained in natural. Sometimes people call it intuition. It's just a sense of inner satisfaction and commitment. And if somebody has had or has a relationship with God, there are many things you do that you're not able to explain to a third party, but you say, I believe that this is what I need to do. So that's what we call conviction right there. So let me go to the 7th question, which is perhaps where we stopped in the 10th episode. By the way, once again, I welcome you and thank you for coming and thank you for joining. Just click the share button, invite friends and family. So the 7th question is there anything like a Christian marriage? Why can I not just marry anyone? Is marriage relationship a guarantee in life that I will be happy? Well, let me start by saying that you first have to accept the fact that you must not marry. That getting married is a choice that we must make. It's not the most important decision we make in life. However, when you choose to marry, the person you choose to marry and how you choose to marry can have a lasting impact on your life on earth. It will affect you in so many ways that few other things will be able to affect you. So that's the thing. Now, some people have lived successful lives, very effective lives, and they were not married. And so many examples in modern history, in ancient history, and so on and so forth. Even Paul, the writer of most of the New Testament, was not known to have been married at the time of his conversion and throughout his Christian experience. Maybe he was married before, we don't know. But the point I'm making again is that, so don't make it a do or die affair, but for those people that choose to marry, the question is there anything like a Christian marriage? Well, the truth is that marriage is a God institution. It's a divine institution. So there was marriage before there was Christianity, if you associate Christianity with Christ. Because the Bible tells us, in Acts chapter 11 verse 26, that the disciples were called Christians first in Antioch. Before they were Christians, therefore, there was marriage. So marriage is a divine institution. It's a godly institution. So there are many people that are non-Christians that get married. So so I would say there is really nothing like a Christian marriage. However, the people in the marriage make their marriage Christian. A Christian that is married and marries by the ways of Christ, that means as a follower of Christ, you make it. You make it a Christian marriage yourself. It depends on the basis on which you build your marriage and the values on which your marriage is built. That's probably what makes your marriage a Christian. It's just like a cloth. I want you to don't misunderstand the point I'm making. I'm saying that there's nothing like Christian clothing or a Christian car, Christian ball or Christian building or Christian business, but the business person, the owner of a business, the business will take the morality and the values of your owner, just like money. Money is immoral. Money has no morality of itself. We've said that last week and I say it again. So money takes on the morality of the beholder. Whoever has the money, money takes on your values. What you do with your money is a function of your values. How your marriage plays out is a function of who you are. So we can consider we can say a marriage is Christian only because the people involved follow the ways of Christ and they choose to make Christ the preeminent person in their life. So is there anything like a Christian marriage? The answer is yes and no. Yes, because you can make your marriage Christian because of the way you live. But you can't claim anything. You can't claim that's a Christian marriage because people have to live out their lives. People have to make it work for them. In other words, God is the author of marriage. God said, therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother and cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. We call this the law of marriage. He said, therefore shall a man, any man at all, shall leave his father and his mother and cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So any man at all can be married, any man at all. But you decide what kind of marriage you have. The second part of that question, why can't I just marry anyone? I think you can just marry anyone. However, you have to consider the consequences of every choice that you make. So the way to look at this is this. I know that when people ask that question, what they're really saying is that is there only one person that God has created that you can marry? Is there only one person? The answer to that question, the way I look at it from a Christian perspective, and from just looking at the Bible and looking at life, is that my answer to that question is there is not only one person that you can marry. Because there are over 7 billion people on earth. But when you invite God to your marriage, according to your present circumstances, God will guide you. But because God finishes our life before we're born, He guides us through the process of making the best choice possible. So for every choice you make, we call it combination and permutation. Every choice you make, God will give you the combination and permutation. What God does is to give you the best outcome out of life. If you trust God, if you trust in the Lord with all your heart, God will say, if you do this, this is the result. If you do that, this is the result. And when you trust God, God will guide you to the person with whom you get the best outcome from life per time. Okay? Because if I said to you that there's just only one person, it means that if these two people got married and one person passed away, the other person can never marry again. That's one example. The other example is that because of the agency of man, if there was only one person and that person refuses to marry you, or you refuse to marry the person because you have the power of choice, because God put in the Garden of Eden a tree, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and said, don't eat of this tree. But he didn't robotize man. He didn't say, man, you cannot. He said, you should not. But man chose to, because the power of choice was there. That's what is the agency of man. Because of that, man fell. So the point I'm making again is that man has a choice. You can choose. You can make the choice. You can choose to live anywhere. You can choose to go anywhere. You can choose to marry anybody. But when you walk with God and you feel that I do not have the power to make the best choices by myself, especially if it's the kind of choice that lasts a lifetime, and you invite God, God will guide you. God's guidance is to give you the best outcome from life. So I hope that makes a lot of sense to us. Okay, so in looking to marry, for those who are still single, you're just praying for what we have called God's will for your life, or God's best outcome from your life. Now, we know that there are many things that God has ordained from the foundations of the earth. By the way, is that concept that brings us to the place where we say, in seeking the face of God, what kind of prayer do you pray? So you can, your choice is involved, but you can go to God in prayer And in your relationship with him, you can talk about, say, what is best for me is what I desire from you. That which you have ordained for me from the foundations of the earth. By the way, this is what I teach when I teach the concept of a life purpose. I believe that God finishes our lives before we're born, and that the marriage, the person we marry, for those of us who choose to marry, our marriage is an integral part of God's plan for our lives, and it's something that one should never take lightly. So from that perspective of saying that God has ordained certain things before the foundations of the earth, it means that in God's agenda for your life, there is a plan. In that plan, there is a marriage. In that marriage, there is a person. Now, when a person seeks the face of God and walks with God, then God can guide you through that process. But remember that I put a caveat there to say that sometimes people that are supposed to be involved in your life can make the decision that they will not obey, they will not participate. When they do that, it doesn't stop God from bringing to pass his plan for your life. That plan will just happen without them. So that's why I say that even though God has a finished plan, that when things happen on earth, God is able to make the adjustments so that you are not bound by a person's decision to marry you or to not marry you. So that's my response to that. Is marriage relationship a guarantee that I'll be happy? Very great question. Is marriage a guarantee that I'll be happy? I would like to ask you, are you happy now? Because marriage will bring many positive things in your life. It will also bring to you a sense of responsibility. Okay? So I would say that it's better to be happy before you marry than to say, I'm unhappy and I'm hoping to be happy because of my marriage. Because when you say, I'm hoping that my marriage will bring me happiness, it means that you are depending on external factors to be happy in life. Whereas even though being happy and being joyful are quite not the same. So let's also make that distinction and that comparison. So happiness appears to be a function of happenings which are circumstantial, whereas joy is from within. It's even called the fruit of the Spirit. So it depends on what you mean by happiness here. If you mean external circumstances, of course, your marriage can have that external impact. You go to your wedding, you go to the reception, you have a spouse now, children come in and all that. Also comes with a lot of responsibility. But if what you're really asking is, will I have inner satisfaction? Well, it's better to make sure that you're working towards inner satisfaction before marriage, and marriage can then reinforce that. Marriage is not a recipe for happiness. You should be happy before getting married, happy in the process, and happy in the marriage itself. And I hope that makes a lot of sense to you. There is nothing to guarantee your happiness more than the choice you make about life, because not even external circumstances should deprive you of the joy of living life effectively on earth. It's a choice. We have to make the choice. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next question for the sake of time. And I thank you for joining. Those of us who have joined, you're welcome. I welcome different people. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Oluwale. God bless you for joining. Just make sure you click on the share button, invite friends, invite family. My next question, I meet many people that seem to be happy and they have not followed some of the guidelines that you teach. Some people I know cohabitated for years and got married and they seem to be getting along just as well. Why can I not live with my boyfriend and marry later? Is there really anything wrong with that? Very great question. Maybe I should repeat the question. Maybe I read it a bit too fast. I meet many people that seem to be happy and they have not followed your guidelines that you teach. Some people cohabited for years and then got married and seem to be getting along just well. Why can't I just marry my boyfriend and be happy? Is there really anything wrong with that? Very, very, very great question. So what I would say is that let's consider some of the things that we teach, okay? So most of our teachings are based on principles. And we know that life on earth is governed by laws. And these laws, when they're discovered by man and applied to man's circumstances, become principles. So principles are laws that God has put in place, discovered by man to make life easy. So let's look at what I call the law of marriage. The law of marriage states, and we get this from Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. By the way, it's the basis of our teachings on marriage. We call it the law of marriage. Therefore, shall a man leave his father and his mother and be cleaved to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This is the law of marriage. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother and be cleaved to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So this part of the principles and the guidelines that we teach. We teach that people should remain separate and single and do the best they can to keep themselves until marriage. We're saying that sex is only legal in the basis of marriage. That any level of sexual intimacy before marriage, from a divine perspective, what I call God's perspective, is a sin against God, and a sin, in a sense, a sin against humanity. So that's part of the things that we teach, and maybe that's what they're really asking in this guideline. So some people said, so when they say cohabitate, it means living together. It means a man and a woman who live together, but they've not been joined together in marriage, and so they're living together as if they were husband and wife without being husband and wife. So what essentially what the person is asking here, or what the question entails, is that, is it proper? Are there any consequences? Well, I know that we live in a modern world. The world is modernized in so many respects, and so somebody can say that these laws are they not a bit a cake? You know, you do have a point there, but here's what I would say: everything has consequences. God designed the marriage institution, and one of the purposes of marriage is to preserve the human race, purity. The other reasons for marriage, like procreation, pleasure, power in prayer, the other things that God has put in place that we always talk about when we talk about the purposes of marriage. We know that marriage is one of the things that God put in place for him to be able to fulfill the dominion mandate he gave to man. He said, be fruitful and multiply. And it's impossible for man to multiply without the law or the concept of marriage. Now, why is it that God put it in place to say that people should live apart until they marry? Many reasons. One of those reasons is to preserve the human race. Number two is to preserve the sanctity of marriage, to make the marriage bed undefiled. Number three is also to give people what to look forward to that make marriage exciting. Empirical evidence have shown that people that have actually lived together before marriage are more likely to divorce after marriage than those that did not live together. And one of the reasons for that could be because those that did not live together have a lot to look forward to. And those who have lived together have nothing to look forward to. And not having something to be hopeful about could reduce the level of joy and happiness that can come with a marriage. And by the way, the other downside of that, of course, is that when people live together, eventually, some of the time, it doesn't work out. So those people go their ways. And maybe those same parties go and then they cohabitate with another person. So that goes on in society. So that at the time people are getting married, sometimes they've had so many experiences, these human experiences, so that they begin to compare their marital relationship or their partner or their spouse. They begin to compare them with somebody else in their past. Those things can also bring a certain level of dissatisfaction because sometimes it's very difficult to satisfy a person who is unconsciously connecting you to other people or comparing to other people. You're not even aware. There are many times there are conflicts in people's homes, and the reason those conflicts exist is because secretly somebody is comparing somebody to another person and they're not even aware of that. So that's one of the downside of that. So why can't I just leave my boyfriend and then marry later? Well, the point I want to make is that what is the guarantee that living with your boyfriend or girlfriend eventually will lead to marriage? What about if you don't marry? What happens to you? What happens to him? And then that precious gift that you are supposed to give to your partner, and say that, by the way, one of the things a person can give to their partner that they can't give to any other person is their virginity, whether it's primary virginity or secondary virginity. Of course, it's a difficult subject to discuss in the world today, in modern times, where people where sex is not doesn't have the sacredness with which it's been associated with in days gone by, where people do not respect those laws of God. But I can say to you this, that the commandments of God, which are his instructions, they are not grievous. Every rule God made was for a reason. God did that to preserve the human race and actually to give people long-term satisfaction in marriage. So somebody says, is there anything wrong with that? I believe from God's perspective, there is something wrong with that. It means that you are not giving God the opportunity to bring certain kind of blessings to your relationship. Is it the unpardonable sin? The answer is no. That when we sin against God, he forgives us, but there is no need to put the laws of God in your hand, because there are so many benefits that we're not even able to touch here that accrues to us when we follow the laws of God. When we say, I will walk separately, I will live a principle-centered life, and I will live with the fear of God, and then when it's time to marry, I'll marry, and then when I marry, I give my body to my partner as my partner gives their body to me, and then we belong to one another. And what God therefore has joined together, let no man put asunder. Okay, so that's my response to that. Of course, if you have more questions, please feel free to send them in. Now, the ninth question said, is attraction. Remember, I started from number 7 today because I dealt with the first 6 questions last week. Let me have some water, please. Question number 9, is attraction not enough basis for marriage? If I'm strongly attracted to someone, should I not go ahead and marry them? It's a very good question. Very good indeed. The way I would like to look at this is to say that attraction is needed in marriage. But remember this, both for male and female, the likelihood you'll be attracted to more than one person in your life exists for everybody. And then you're not supposed to marry multiple people. So it means that attraction is important for marriage. It's necessary for marriage, but cannot therefore be the only basis of marriage. Because what about if you feel attraction? Because you can't measure this attraction, okay? If you feel attraction to more than one person, okay? So what it does mean is that a person must have a strong attraction for the person that they marry. Because that's one of the things that can sustain your marriage, that you're connected to your spouse. There's a connection there. There's attraction, that you are satisfied with your spouse, that your spouse is your friend, that you get along with your spouse. But it's not the only thing to consider in marriage. You have to consider values. What do you have? Values alignment? Are you moving in the same direction? Do you have the same convictions about life? Are you fully persuaded in the same way? What is your definition of life? Okay. Do you have the same definition of life? There are many factors that are important about relationships. Because for a relationship that go the distance, something that is temporary, something relating just for a day, having an acquaintance or a friend, just for a day, for 3 months, for 5 years, is totally different from being married to a person. So attraction, very strong factor. But we talked about satisfaction, we talked about conviction, we also talked about divine leadership, the fact that you must trust God to lead you. But because you will live with your spouse, ultimately is your choice. And you have to live with somebody you're attracted to, because you have to live with them for many years to come. You're going to meet many people throughout your life, but your spouse should occupy that special place given to them by you, that they have a special place because they are the most important person in your life apart from God. Okay? So attraction is important, because if you're not attracted to your partner, you can be distracted from your partner. So attraction is one of those things that will keep you going, because you meet people all the time, but that strong attraction can be a basis for that longer term relationship, which is what marriage is all about. So that's a great question. I'll go to the 10th question. Of course, if you have anything, just send your points and thoughts. I'm getting older, okay? I'm not engaged or involved with anyone, okay? Very well said. And it says, I know my biological clock is ticking. What should I do? I do not want to appear desperate, but I'm worried about what the future holds for me. So I'm getting older. My biological clock is ticking. And I'm not even involved with anybody at this time. What should I do? Should I offer myself? Should I chip in myself? Should I throw myself at somebody? Why don't I become somebody's second or third wife? Okay, this is a great question. So let me address this. We have our human timings, and God has His own timing. And I don't want to philosophize this or over spiritualize it. But, even in being practical about life, you do not need to compare your life to anybody's life. The fact that you have a friend, a colleague, a former classmate, schoolmate, colleague at work, a partner, a friend, an acquaintance who is about your age or somebody you have grown up with that are married, they have kids or children, you should not put you under undue pressure. You should be able to work out the very details of your own personal life. Yes, you make a good point about biological clock ticking. What I would say from both the Bible, reading the Bible, and life generally, is that it's better to be single and happy and to be married and sad, because a marriage that is not properly covenanted or engaged will bring you a level of unhappiness that will eventually affect your mental health and your overall well-being. So it's better to marry and marry well. For the ladies, I want to counsel you, do not cheapen yourself. I didn't say prove yourself to be difficult, but don't make yourself cheap, because it's important that you put a value on whom you marry, and that you're valuable to whom marries you. It's important that you don't, and it appeals to men too, but perhaps mostly women, don't get to a place where you're so desperate because you're saying to yourself, my biological clock is ticking, and therefore I will break laws and maybe make myself a second wife, or cheapen myself, or throw myself at somebody. those things sometimes lead to dire consequences. It can affect the foundation of that marriage, where there's no real value for for yourself. It's important that you trust God. So my counsel to you is that trust the Lord with all your heart, and lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your path. God, there are two timings. God spoke to Habakkuk, and Habakkuk said, I will stand upon my watch and listen to hear what God will tell me. And he said to me, write the vision down and make it plain, that he might run that readeth it. Then he says, if it tarries, wait for it, for it shall surely come, it shall not tarry. Okay, so I always talk about the timings. These are two timings, generally two timings. Praise God. Okay, two timings. It's good to understand these timings. When you say timing, it says, if it tarries, wait for it. It shall surely come, it shall not tarry. So by human timing, there are many things that are long in coming. And they make us put laws in our hand. They make us, we're under pressure. And yet, from a divine timing, I wonder what you would have thought about. I'm not applying that to you, but think about Zechariah and Elizabeth. The Bible said they were well stricken in years and they were barren, but they didn't know that God had serious plan for them. So it's important to know that God's timing and man's timing are not the same. So be patient. Everything is going to work out well. What about you say that? What about if I missed an opportunity? Well, I pray for you today that God will restore to you missed opportunities in Jesus' mighty name. He's a God of a second chance. He could do a lot for you. And I ask God to help you today and do something for you that looks humanly seemingly impossible in Jesus' mighty name. But I want to encourage you, do not go to position yourself as a second wife and a third wife, because Bible says, therefore shall a man leave father and mother. That means leave his father, leave his mother, and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one. It didn't say 3 or 4, okay? It didn't talk about a combination of 3 women and 1 man, or 4 men to 1 woman, and all that, okay? So I want you to be patient and trust God. And it might look as if what kind of advice is that, but I know that God will bring you along the way in that matter. Let me go to the 11th question here. Okay, it says, I'm a career woman. I'm busy with my work. I love what I do, but I also want to marry and build a family. Is my career a barrier to finding the right partner? Do you have any advice for me? And that means that this is somebody who said, I'm a career woman. I'm busy with my work. I love what I do, so I love to go to work every day. But I don't have time, to look around, or I don't have time to socialize. So is somebody going to find me? How will I find a partner? It's a great question. What I will say to you is be sensitive to life. Be sensitive. When you listen to testimony of people, how they met their partners, whether it's a man meeting a woman, whether it's a woman meeting a husband, it's very exciting. In the normal living of life, people meet people. Okay, it could be you driving to work. It could be you. It could be somebody at work. It could be you just taking a break. It could be you taking a vacation, just going out for an official meal. Just going to eat. Just be sensitive. Be sensitive. Pray. Trust God. Believe God. Be open. Be sincere. Be sensitive. And and make yourself. I think the key word there is sensitive. I like that word. What I'm trying to say in effect is that you might not need to do anything extraordinary. Just remember this, that God rules in the affairs of men, that there's not so much you can do. I mean, yes, people can throw themselves at people, and that, people, that happens. But I want to encourage you, dress well, make yourself attractive, be nice to people, be polite, be the kind of person that, love people and be available and sensitive. What I mean by available and sensitive is that don't live a closed up life. Don't appear to be uninterested in the school of marriage. In the institution of marriage. Be available by being sensitive. Dress nice. Look after yourself. And be, when you relate with people, be nice to people. I can tell you this, that men love women that are polite, that are nice. That very few men will want to marry a person that is going to be fighting with them and challenging them. By challenge, I'm not talking about engagement in terms of intellectual engagement or debating or trying to make decisions. No, but people that are unduly aggressive. Some of this is unconscious, but there are so many things a person can do, especially a lady can do, to make herself attractive. But remember that ultimately, that is God that guides our life. The steps of a righteous man, they are ordered not of the man, but of the Lord. The ways of man are not in himself. It's not in a man that walketh to direct his own steps. The ways of a man are not in a man's steps. It's not in a man who walks to direct their own steps. Believe me, many times we think we're in charge, but God is in charge of our lives. He leads us, He guides us. So that's why the Bible says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not unto your understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge Him. He's going to direct your path. So have faith in God, that God will direct your path. I welcome you, all those who are joining and those who have been here for a while. I welcome you. So I'm saying this again, that our ways are not in ourselves. We don't have the capacity to be able to direct our own lives. No. It's the prerogative of God. Man has a part to play. I call it the agency of man. Man is an agent of God. I never doubt that, because that's what we call the dominion mandate. God partners with man. In fact, the Bible teaches in Psalm 115 verse 16 that heaven, even the heaven of heavens, belong to God, but the earth God has given to the children of men. Very powerful scripture, But I want to encourage you again to say, you should listen to testimony. We're going to be bringing people here, in the next several weeks. We're bringing people to the platform. Some will be sharing experiences. Some of them are married. Some will also be single, by the way. They're just going to hear. Some will work with us to ask some of these questions and bring questions from their friends and family. But the important thing is that we're bringing people here also who will be sharing their testimonies of how they got married. For me, focus on the principle. So these things happen in the normal course of life. People sometimes are friends, acquaintances for years, and they're not even thinking about marriage. And then when they start to focus on it, and they realize, by the way, wow, what about this person, and so on and so forth. So you should not, don't be afraid, and God will not pass you by. And then if you belong to that category where you're afraid, I'm a career woman, maybe I'm losing opportunity, I would say to you, have faith in God. God will take care of you. Be busy. It's good to be busy with your work, but also think about what the future holds for you. Okay, you love what you do. That's great. That's great. That's part of what you'll be bringing to the table when you eventually marry. Both of you and your husband will sit down and plan the future that you have together. It's good because when you are able to carry your own weight, just in terms of growing, because what thing a career will do for you, you're going to grow in many dimensions of life. There's a spiritual dimension, there's the emotional dimension, there's a social dimension, there's a financial dimension, there's the what you might call the mental dimension. These are all the dimensions of life, and that's what you bring to the table when you marry. When you bring these things to the table, it makes you a wholesome person and makes marriage more likely to succeed than otherwise when somebody has to carry the weight of two people. So let's go to the 12th question. You say we are created for relationships. How important are relationships? Do I have to marry? Can I just remain friends with my partner and not go all the way, especially with the rising divorce rate? Will I not be protecting myself from potential hurt by getting married? Great question. So these are several questions in one. Am I not protecting myself from potential hurt? I mean, this may be what is maybe prevalent in the European part of the world. People are marrying less and having less children and so on and so forth. It says, because of a rising divorce rate, should I not forget about marriage? Can't I just have a friend? And, how far should I go? You say we're created for relationship. The answer is yes. That's how we're wired by God. And then, so how important are relationships? Well, relationships can be very wholesome. When a marriage is working out, the partners are much happier than those who are single. When a marriage is not working out, the partners are much sadder than those who are single. So that's how it works, right? So people have said, and it makes a lot of sense, that marriage is the closest to heaven we can get on earth. A working marriage, for that matter. And then a marriage that is not working out is also the closest to hell people can get on earth. It can be so devastating. I mean, the mental impact, it affects people's mental well-being, eventually overall well-being, and of course, it leads to a lot of decay in society, But one point I must make here, in responding to this question, is that successful marriages take a lot of work, because the greatest work a person can do in life is working on themselves. If you truly want to prepare for a successful marriage, the hardest work is what you work on yourself. You have to work on yourself. You bring yourself to a marriage and you make it happen. Sometimes a person can work so hard on themselves that they even almost, in quote, carry their weight and the weight of their partner, and they make life so easy that the other partner just has to turn around and join them. But coming back to this question about relationship, right? What I would say is that that because a working marriage will bring you more happiness than being single, I believe that if you desire to marry and you were created to marry, I think you should prepare yourself for marriage and be open to marriage. Read a lot of books, go to marriage seminars, attend classes like this, ask questions from married couples, and by the way, you ask them, tell them, don't patch it up for me, tell me the way it is. What can I do to effectively prepare myself for marriage? Just remember that marriage is not everything. I said this at the beginning, I want to emphasize this. You do not have to marry to be happy. You do not have to marry to live an effective life. But if you've been designed for marriage, so when I talk about relationships, what I mean by relationship transcends marriage. Remember, there's relationship before marriage. There's relationship in families, There's relationship in class. When you go to a class, there's relationship at work. We are created for human relationships. Human relationships, therefore, is not limited to marriage relationship. Marriage relationship is only one type of relationship, right? So that's what I mean by relationship. We are created to coexist with other people. We are created to be part of a community. God planned the solitary in families. God placed us in homes. Those homes are filled with relationship. There's relation between husband and wife, between siblings, between a child and father, a child and mother, and so on and so forth. There are relation between cousins, between people at work, colleagues at work, professional colleagues, in government offices and all kinds of offices. There are always human relationships. So when I say we are created for relationship, I'm even saying that even before you marry, make the most of your relationship. How are you getting along? By the way, we get along by getting along. How much treasure do you put on the relationship you have today? And how much are you servicing those relationships? How much input are you making? How much credits are you making into those relationships? And it's a learned thing. The skills, it takes what we call interpersonal skills, getting along, what Christians will call the fruits of the Spirit. Those qualities that make a person get along with other people, they are all things we can develop and evolve in and grow in. And I like to say that we should grow into the marriage relationship and grow throughout our marriage relationships. We should grow into it. We should, there's a level of maturity, a level of emotional maturity, a level of physical maturity, a level of spiritual maturity, a level of mental maturity that a person needs, a level of financial maturity that a person should bring to a marriage relationship that can make it really, really, really work, So thank you very much for that. Will I not be protecting myself from potential hurt by not getting married? Well, you would be, but remember that you have to be vulnerable in order to be viable. When you take risks in life, okay, a risk is a risk, but remember that when you take risk, the potential outcome can make you much better than the person that took no risk at all. People that live life by walking the beaches of this life cannot understand the blessings that come to those who do great business with God in the great waters of the earth. In other words, when you launch into the deep, marriage is like launching out into the deep, potentially, if it's done properly, it can bring you a lot of help. Why? Because two are better than one. A person will chase 1,000, but guess what? Two will chase not 2,000, not 3,000, not 4,000, not 5,000. Two will chase 10,000. It's a multiplier effect. The possibilities that exist between two people living together happily, it's so much. It's incredible. It's incredible. The Bible says, if any two of you shall agree on earth, as touching anything they shall ask, it shall be done for them of my Father who is in heaven. That's the power of prayer. That's the power of agreement. Any two of you, marriage potentially, two people that are married and happy and praying, they can change the world around them. Because when both of them agree on earth, it will be done for them by God who lives in the heaven, even the heaven of heavens. So it's very powerful. Now, let me go to this because of time. Number 13, what is God's perspective on marriage? So if I remain single, do I have relationships that are intimate from time to time? Is there really a big deal about intimacy? These are, I think we've started to deal with questions like this, and then I will take a look at it again. What I will say is that God's perspective of marriage is that He's the author of marriage. God owns the marriage institution. Marriage is not God's idea. It's not man's idea. Marriage is a big idea, but not man's idea. Marriage was God's idea. The Bible says that that it was God that said, "Let us create man in our own image after our likeness." It was also God that said, "It's not good that man should be alone." One of the things I've said in the past, and I want to repeat here, is the fact that that statement that God made in the Garden of Eden and says, "It's not good that man should be alone. I will find him or create for him or send him a helpmeet for him," showed that God looked at man and thought about man and actually looked at the options that were available to man and say, could man have a relation with the tree or the snake or lion? In other words, he looked at all the animals, because these animals were created before Eve was made out of Adam. And God looked around. He said, no. Nothing is going to work. Nobody can relate with man the way man can relate with man. I will create for man a help meet for him. That means a help comparable to him, a help his own size. And that's the question of spouse and partnership. A help, not just anybody, but his own size. They are sizing a marriage. There could be oversized, undersized, too tight, and stuff like that. Yeah, it's good to have proper alignment in marriage. And the example I've given over the past, is like a pair of designer shoes. I say designer because you use the same format, same material, and you make shoes the same. Sometimes the leather is the same. Maybe it's black leather, and you make shoes of maybe 5 sizes: size 5, size 6, size 7, size 8, size 9. You don't just go to the shop and just buy a pair of shoes. You have to buy your size. They're the same make, same maker, same designer, same materials. The sole is the same, but you buy your size. Marriage is like that. So God's perspective of marriage is that it's a good thing for a man to be married. Number 2, God hates divorce. Number 3, God will bring into your life the person that is your size. You partner with him. He put Adam to sleep, which means he says that I'm totally involved in this matter. Number 4, marriage is a covenant. It's not just a partnership. It's the highest level of human partnership, but it's a covenant. It's a covenant because God talks about covenants in the book of Malachi. It's a covenant because it's something that God is very involved with. And breaking the covenant of marriage can lead to some consequences, all kinds of consequences. The other point to make about marriage is that it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful way for a human to live their life. It leads to multiplication of people on earth. Leads to procreation, purity, power. The power of prayer. Obviously, it's one of the things that can enhance a man fulfilling their purpose on earth. When you have the right partner, both of you will encourage each other, and the likelihood of fulfilling your destiny, each individually and corporately, increases by multiplier effect. Increases in very, very, very at a very high rate, because 2 are better than 1. One, they can bring warmth to each other. They can brainstorm. They can discuss. They can pray together. They can do so much more together. So the opportunity to marry is a great opportunity. God's perspective is that he created it for man and for a reason. And God believes that man should marry. In history, sometimes people are created not to marry, but those are the exception, not the rule. The rule is that the average person will get married, and that God sees marriage as a sacred institution. He says marriage is honorable in all the bed undefiled. God sees it as a holy institution. It's an estate that people should not engage in without thinking about it. And God doesn't like people coming into marriage and then trying to destroy the marriage institution by divorcing and so on and so forth. It's not the unpardonable sin, but the Bible says he hates divorce. He wants to make it happen. He wants to make it work. And then what else is God's perspective? I believe God's perspective is preparation. Because he said, therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, or cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. He says, therefore shall a man, not a boy, a man. So that talks about certain levels of maturity. So that takes preparation in marriage. We prepare. And there are many ways we prepare today to marry. It's something you should think through. It's something you should prepare for. You can ask questions. You can do that prayerfully by reading books, by studying, attending seminars, and by spending time with yourself and reflecting and say, what kind of marriage do I want to have? The other perspective of God in marriage is that when God created man in Genesis chapter 1, he talked about marriage in chapter 2, and then Adam got married to his wife, Eve, in chapter 2. Everything was perfect. The fall of man is in chapter 3. So there was a purpose for marriage, and there was a plan for marriage. So in Matthew 19, as we read very often, when the Pharisees came to Jesus and said, but why did Moses ask us to give a bill of divorcement to our spouses? Well, Jesus said, from the beginning, it was not so. So I want to declare to you again that God's perspective of a marriage is that from the beginning, it was not so. So what is it that was so from the beginning? Well, I call this first principles. In other words, what is it that was God's intention from the beginning? Well, it was that a man shall leave his father, and the same man shall leave his mother and be joined to his wife, and they'll start a new family unit on the earth. And that family unit will grow up to have children, that will grow up to have children, that will grow up to have children. That's why he fulfills the mandate he gave to man by saying, multiply, replenish the earth. That's part of that mandate, that part of that dominion mandate. The fact that man was to go all over the world and cause the glory of God to cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. So marriage is honorable in all the bed undefiled. Marriage is a good thing. Marriage can bring a lot of joy and happiness. Marriage can have a multiplier effect on those who are married. It can lead them, they can have an effective prayer life, because if any two of you shall agree on earth, so the husband and wife can be those two partners, and they can change the world on their knees. They can change the world standing on their feet. So the final question we'll be treating today is, what is the role of spirituality in a successful marriage? Very well said. So my question will be, how do you define spirituality? How do you define spirituality? Okay, so the way to consider this is that we live by faith and not by sight. We live by faith, not by sight. Spiritual, what cannot be seen, the unseen realm. So by spirituality, the way I would look at spirituality is to consider the unseen realm, not just merely the physical, the unseen realm. Okay, so there are many things that we do in life that is if it is on the basis of taste, of things we can touch, we can see, we can feel with our hands, and so on and so forth. But there are things that exist that cannot be touched. They are not physical. So when the Bible says we walk by faith, not by sight, it's talking about two worlds: the spiritual realm and the physical realm. So if you say spirituality, it means that God is real and rules in the affairs of men. So when we say, what's the role of spirituality? Let's consider Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10. It says that God created us for good works, which was ordained by him even before time began. Each of us created for good works. It means that we have a destiny pre-prepared by God for us. Then in 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 9, it talks about God's grace and purpose given to us before time began. It means that our lives on earth were planned by God before we were born. The implication of that is that living life on earth is a way to work things out that have been preordained. Does that take away from the enormous capacity available to man, the enormous opportunity? I don't think the answer is yes. I wouldn't say it's yes. But I think that being spiritual is being mindful of the fact that there is more to life than what we can see with our eyes. It's also an opportunity to partner with the unseen realm by partnering with God. Prayer is very powerful. When we call upon God's name, He answers prayer. I can say that you lose nothing by developing a prayer life, but you gain everything in the world. All things are possible to him that believes. If you can believe, all things are possible to him that believes. Jesus said, with man it's impossible, but not with God. For with God, all things are possible. He even asked Sarah. He said, God did ask Sarah and Abraham. He said, is there anything too hard for Jehovah? And then he said to Jeremiah, there is nothing too hard for Jehovah. There's nothing too hard. There is nothing. There is nothing too hard for Jehovah. And I want to say to you, nothing is too hard for God. There is so much a man can accomplish in life. So much. And that man can accomplish even so much more with the help of God. So what's the role of spirituality in a successful marriage? I believe that when people invite God to their marriage, it becomes a threefold cord that cannot easily be broken. God becomes the top partner in that marriage. By the way, in Malachi, God says to the people of Israel, I was a witness to your marriage to the wife of your youth by covenant. And because you have not treated her fairly, I have not been answering your prayers, despite all your sacrifices on the altar. You go to the altar, you give offerings in church, you pay tithes, you do all kinds of things. He said, but you're not prospering because you've been unfaithful to the wife of your youth. Spirituality is being mindful of the unseen realm. Is being God conscious. God consciousness is being aware that God is with you all the time, that you are a mobile altar or tabernacle. In other words, God in this dispensation and generation has chosen to dwell in man. God no longer lives in buildings. God doesn't live in buildings or cathedrals. They are good for services, but I can tell you that each person that comes to the cathedral brings God with him. God is with you. You are a carrier of God. And it's extremely important that we live with that in mind. That's what we call spirituality. I remember a story a pastor said years ago. He said that a member of his congregation had a partner who was Indian, I believe. And he said that the person must have come to Nigeria to do business and noticed how often people cheat people in the marketplace. Maybe it's in the open marketplace, maybe it's in business transactions. Very interesting. And he says that the Indian said to his Nigerian partner, he says that these people are very religious, but not spiritual. They're religious because they do go to church quite a bit, but they're not spiritual because they forget that, spiritually speaking, that people reap in life what they sow. So I want to say, being spiritual is knowing that there are laws that govern life. The laws may be unseen, but they always work. They always work once the rules are activated or the conditions are met. Marriage, spirituality has a lot to do in marriage. I want to encourage those who are single to trust God. That's spirituality. Those who are married to trust God. That's spirituality. Walk with God every day. Live a God-conscious life, despite the society in which you have found yourself. Become a carrier of that God. Remember that God is all-seeing. His eyes run to and fro the whole earth to show himself strong on behalf of them whose hearts are perfect toward him. That's spirituality. Just being mindful of God's presence. And I want to thank you for being a part of our broadcast today. Thank you for coming. I hope you have left some of your comments, and I also hope that this session has been a blessing to you. We are open to questions. Type your questions, send them in, and then we appreciate them. And I'm sure that they do make a big difference. And I look forward to seeing you next week. And don't forget to invite friends and family. And please click on the share button, share this session, and invite other people. And I hope that this has gone on well for you. Thank you, all my numerous friends from around the world who have been able to join. I'm so glad to partner with you at this time. God bless you, and have a good evening. I will look before I sign off. I will look and see if there's any question out there that I could attend to before I sign off. I'm seeing some comments. Human timing versus God's timing. That is true. We emphasize that. Thank you very much, Matthew, for joining. Thank you very much. I say good evening to you from where I am. Thank you very much. Christian marriage, that person says yes and no. I said because the marriage will take on the morality and the faith of those in the marriage. So what makes a marriage Christian is because the practitioners decide to be Christians and they make their marriage Christian. Because before there was Christianity, there was marriage. Because there was marriage in the Garden of Eden before Christ was involved with humanity directly. Because the disciples were called Christians first in Acts chapter 11, verse 26. We said that. And I think you understand what I mean. I use many examples. The fact that money is immoral, money takes on the morality of the person that owns the money. And so I think that we dealt with that. I don't know if there's anything else. And of course, let me emphasize this because I'm running off here. Human timing versus God's timing. You may be running late according to your timing. I'm getting old. My body is ticking. But please remember that God said to Habakkuk, the vision will not tarry. Because by my timing, it's going to be on time. But if it tarries by your timing as Habakkuk, wait for it, because it shall surely come, it shall not tarry. Divine timing versus human timing. There's a time for everything on earth. God's timing, man's timing, they are not always aligned, but the misalignment is human. If you trust God, God never fails. He's always on time. He's always on target. And God can turn lost opportunities to tremendous blessings in life. So I want to spend the last few minutes to pray for us. I want to pray for those who are married, that God will make you a godly example and you mentor and disciple many people who are yet to marry, and those who are married will be a blessing, that the lessons you've learned will encourage you to go further and further and go the distance in Jesus' mighty name. And for those who are single, I pray that we are going to share your testimony on this platform and, of course, beyond. We're going to have many people. One of the people we're inviting got married just June last year, and a very simple story, but I think that the story will encourage a lot of people. And we have other people who have opportunity to share the testimony. I pray for you that you're single, that you will testify, you'll marry well. But remember what I've said, that in what I've said today, I said, don't be desperate, that marriage is not everything. It's important. I will never take away from the importance of marriage, but don't be desperate to the point that you make yourself cheap or you break the laws of God because you don't have the capacity to sustain yourself. I know man has enormous capacity, but we'll always need help, okay? There is a part for man to play, and there's God's part, okay? But that partnership is necessary, and it's good to follow the laws of God because that's what ultimately guarantees that you will succeed. Your marriage, a loving work. Your marriage works. Your marriage will work. Your marriage works. Your marriage works. And I know that those of us who are single, that love will work for you and you're going to find that right partner. But don't forget that the best way to find the right partner is to become the right partner yourself. Work the hardest on yourself and be open to God and be open to yourself. Thank you so much for joining, and God bless you. Have an exceptional time and enjoy the rest of your week. I look forward to seeing you next week. God bless you and bye for now. Okay, I didn't see that. What's your view about the second and third wife? I'm just seeing that from Joel. Excellent. Well, I think I've already dealt with that. I said that God's view, somebody might say, well, what about Abraham and so on and so forth? Those were the seasons in man's growth. When Jesus spoke in Matthew chapter 19, he said, so shall a man leave father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So he said, what God therefore has joined together, let no one put asunder. And they started asking questions like, what about giving a bill of divorcement? What about marrying another person, and so on and so forth? So second wife, I mean, there are some godly people in the Bible who are mentioned who had second and third wives, but that man was going through a process. From the beginning, Jesus said it was not so. That is not God's original plan. God did not plan that one man will be married to 2 wives, 3 wives, and 4 wives. That's not his original plan. And that's not what the Bible teaches. There are examples of people that did that in the Bible, but they are not the best examples of God. The law of marriage is clear. It's mentioned 4 times in Scripture. It says, therefore shall a man leave father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, 2. That's the law of marriage. And by the way, laws are, once we discover them, they become principles. That's the principle of marriage. A man, a wife, a man, a woman, they become one flesh. A man becomes a husband, the woman becomes a wife, one flesh. So that's my response to that question about what about second and third wife. What do I think? I don't have any thoughts. My thoughts are my trying to explain what I consider to be the thoughts of God. That those were seasons in God's dealings with man, dispensations. But from the beginning, it was not so. Thank you so much. And God bless you. See you next week. Bye for now.